My name is Dale. I want to welcome you to my channel, Observer of Anomalous Objects. We're broadcasting from the great state of Oregon. And let me tell you something. I feel like I need a boat right now. We've had all kinds of rain over here. I hope that your weather's a little bit better than what ours is. If you haven't done it already, let me go ahead and encourage you to hit that subscribe button. That'll really help the channel out a lot. I am super excited. I am so excited because today we're going to have a special guest on, and it's Chris Sharp. Before I bring him on, I'm going to read a brief bio for him. Chris Sharp is a British investigative journalist known for his in-depth reporting on UAPs, defense transparency, and unexplained aerial incursions affecting U.S. and U.K. national security. As co-founder and editor of Liberation Times, he has become a leading voice covering government policy, whistleblower testimony, and the emerging global debate over UFO disclosure. And so, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Chris onto the stage. Chris, it's nice having you here. What is the weather like there in the UK? I think you're, about an hour away from London, something like that?
Yeah, correct. So at the moment in the UK, it is wet. It is rain. Well, it's raining, obviously, and it's very, very cold. And it's that kind of like humid, kind of like coldy kind of like thing. I don't know. There's something about the British weather that makes it uniquely cold. Not the dry kind of cold that you can get in North America sometimes, like in places like Toronto. It hits differently. But no, thank you so much for having me on as well, and thank you to your audience for tuning in. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I know people are really, really excited that you're here. I mean, this has been a podcast that's probably been about a year in the making, and we finally got everything lined up where it worked. And when it comes to journalists, you are one of the most respected journalists in my book, because you're covering a topic that a lot of journalists have kind of shied away from. And so I know a few of you guys, and I'm connected to you in some way or another. I've had Matt on the show multiple times, and I'm still trying to get Ross to come on, but I do talk to him in chats every once in a while. But I just want to tell you that I have the utmost respect for you. I think you're just doing a phenomenal job. You're hitting all the right tones. You're holding people accountable. And so I'm really excited about today. Today, we're going to start with the Age of Disclosure, the documentary that Dan Farah put out. There is just a tremendous amount of hype here in the U.S. about this movie. I mean, a lot of people are like, over the cow, as they call it. They are thinking that disclosure's coming at any moment. So let me ask you, how is it being received in the UK? How's that movie being received?
In the UK, I mean, it's been received, but not as largely as it's been received in the US, with multiple news shows having guests on. Although I was on Talk TV, which is kind of like a major UK news channel, about 2 weeks ago. And I think we got like over 200,000 views for that one, which is really, really good for the channel. If you see all the other videos, it's like, 9,000, 11,000, 40,000. And then you see my one and it's like over 200,000, which shows that there is interest, from the UK perspective. And I think, and when you're going on those news shows as well in the UK, you need to kind of just act boring. The last thing they want to see is like a wild UFO guy. And you just kind of need to really, really ground it, I suppose, as well. And you just have to relay it to what it is. It's just unknown. We don't know what it is. It could be Chinese, it could be Russian, it could be balloons, it could be birds, which Mick Quest would like to think, or it could be non-human. It could just be anything. But if it's unknown and it's flying above your most sensitive military facilities, you ought to know what it is, really, and work out what it is quickly.
So when you think about disclosure, and I know with your contacts and stuff, who do you think the greatest resistance to disclosure? Are we talking about, is it the government itself? Is it some department in the government or a group of people in the government? Are we talking about military contractors, or is there something even maybe beyond that that can explain how we have, in this latest documentary, we have 34 credible witnesses come forward. And so you would think, and none of these are new witnesses. These are guys that have all spoken out at other times. What made this show so powerful is that they all came forward for this show, including, former Senator Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio. You had, Senator Gillibrand. You had all of these high-profile people. You had colonels, you had generals, you had admirals. And so, where do you think the resistance is coming from? I mean, people like to use the word gatekeepers. So let's just ask that question. Who do you think the gatekeepers are? Who is the greatest source for trying to keep disclosure from happening?
That's a very, very good question. And I'm still trying to work it out myself. Some sources will tell you that it's the non-human beings that are behind this. If they wanted to show themselves more publicly, they could do, instead of kind of disguising themselves, which they do. They show signs of signature management, which is something that was within the UAP task force report. So it's that, and then you could just blame just the bureaucratic layers as well, and the nexus points where there seems to be resistance. It's basically it's tangled up in the US secrecy and what has been established since World War II, or since the Manhattan Project actually was established, in terms of being wrapped up within special access programs. You have legitimate special access programs that do crash retrievals, mainly of downed satellites or aircraft from foreign adversary nations and stuff. And you never find out about those operations because they're protected, and they're orchestrated between the intelligence, or CIA, and the DoD, and elements of contractors as well. You never hear about those when it comes to Russian downcraft and whatnot. So, you're talking about non-human craft here, which are kind of black missions within these special access programs, that are deeply hidden within those hidden layers themselves that you never hear about. So it's the way that the state's actually set up as well, and how complex everything is. And I think the people most in the know are going to be those people who are the liaison between CIA Director of Science and Technology and Operations, and the DOE. So who's the liaison between those two? And then likewise the CIA and the DoD. You're looking for these kind of points that meet each other because they're having to coordinate these missions, and I think that's where you're going to get some of the answers when it comes to this. But it's deeply wrapped up, and I wish I knew who. I wish I could tell you a person, but I think it's deeply. It's set up by a system more than anything. It's the system itself, I would say.
You brought up something I thought was interesting. It wasn't even in my notes or in my question when I started trying to figure out who the gatekeepers were, but it does make sense, especially with Bigelow, telling James Fox that they walk among us, and there has to be an element of the NHI, whatever you want to call them, multiple dimensional or whatever you want to call them, aliens or whatever. There has to be at least an element of them that don't want disclosure right now, because if they were open to disclosure, I mean, they could make it happen right now. I mean, they could just go land at the White House lawn, or do whatever it took. They could do that. So that's an interesting perspective, that maybe it's not all humans. Maybe it's NHI. So I thought that was an interesting fact. you've probably seen the response. I don't know what it looks like over in the UK. As you said that you were on one talk show. Are any of them, any of the UK networks? I don't know exactly how. I'm not in the UK, so I don't know exactly what the major news outlets are there. But were any of them interviewing Dan Farah?
Not to my knowledge, no. When you look at things like Sky News, BBC, none of those are going to pay much interest to these things. Although they do cover the hearings, the UAP hearings, which is good. But then they always just bring in one of their science guys who basically knows nothing about special access programs, controlled access programs, the layers of secrecy in the US, and he's just like a science guy that knows some stuff about the solar system, and he'll be like, "Oh, the odds of finding intelligent life in the universe of this, and it most likely is nothing," or something like that. And it's just like, gosh, they really don't get it. It's
It doesn't matter how many witnesses you bring out and how credible they are and their testimonies firsthand. It's just kind of like Mick West, I guess, in a way. They're going to come out with some reason why it can't be true, and they start with that premise, Chris, that it can't be true. Therefore it isn't true, and they're not even willing to look at the evidence on it.
Yeah.
Now, in the U.S., we have a problem with our media. Now, I'll have to say this. I thought our media did a much better job on this movie than probably any other documentary I've ever seen about, disclosure, especially now that we're starting to venture into this crash retrieval and reverse engineering stuff. I don't think I've seen them as open to discussing it. And so maybe there's hope for the UK, Chris. Eventually, everybody's going to have to get on board. But here's my question. In the US, and some of it's because of national security. And so you can kind of understand it a little bit. But supposedly there's documentation that the CIA has infiltrated a lot of different major mainstream media out here. And they've killed a lot of stories over the years. And so is there any signs of collusion between the intelligence agencies in the UK and what we would label here in the US mainstream media?
Yeah, you're talking about the closest of allies here. The UK's defense deterrent relies on the US, or well, at least in terms of our nuclear deterrent, we couldn't have that deterrent without the US, and it's when it comes to national security and intelligence matters. Historically, the US and the UK have worked very, very closely on these matters. And, it's been described before that when a UAP will go down in a territory where Five Eyes allies are working, that there may be some kind of a joint mission between the US and the UK. So there is that element to it. I would say that it's not doom and gloom for the UK. It's very frustrating. I will point out that there is a book coming out quite soon by my dear friend Jonathan Kaplan, who is a remarkable person. He is a King's Counsel barrister or lawyer, and that means he's appointed by the monarch. So he is right up there when you come to kind of legal figures, and he's going to publish a book about UFOs. And it's going to be remarkable, in my opinion. I mean, you're talking about a really, really serious person coming at this topic. And I think he's going to come with receipts. He's going to come at it from a very, very grounded perspective. And hopefully that does change the conversation in the UK. But there's plenty of stuff to look at in the UK. I mean, I've reported on a crash retrieval before in Northern England. We've got that in the Daily Mail. We've got a bunch of drone incidents that happened over the UK as well in the Daily Mail. So, yeah, we've tried our best to report things in the UK, but I guess it mostly appeals to an American audience. And I think the UK quickly needs to catch up on this, especially if there is some form of disclosure which is going to come from the US, which I don't know is going to happen anytime soon, but we hope so.
Well, let me ask the other question. Obviously, it didn't get as much exposure in the UK, the age of disclosure. But you've probably seen most of the clips. I mean, they've been out there on News Nation, they've been on Fox, they've been on all these other different programs. If you look at those clips together and you hear what the media is saying, what is the biggest miss from this movie, from the media?
the biggest miss? I think I think they should be asking more questions. Firstly, I think that the presidential press pool should be asking questions to Donald Trump. And I think, secondly, I think people should be, and I don't know if they have been, but they should be reaching out to James Clapper. This is a major figure here who's been speaking out on this topic. He's taken very, very seriously within intelligence circles. Yes, I think in the US, at least, that he's quite controversial. But look, you've got a movie here with kind of Democrats and Republicans, both sides agreeing to the same thing, basically, and coming to the same conclusion that there is something in our skies, and they don't know what it is. So I think that, and look, you've got places like the Directorate of Science and Technology within the CIA mentioned as well. I think what you have to do is you have to pay attention to that, and I think it needs journalists with the resources to travel around, backed by a major news network or newspaper with credentials, to actually get in front of some of these people who would be in the know, go up to former directors of science and technology within the CIA, get them on record. I've even managed to do that with Dawn Mayorix, who was one of the former deputy directors of science and technology within the CIA. I got her on record. So why can't other news media start their own investigations? Look at contractors, look how contractors, become placed within the Defense Department, even in bureaucratic positions, for instance. Look how that works, how all the complexity helps to hide and kind of up the secrecy and just make it more difficult to actually provide transparency. Look at these layers. This is a really, really complex topic, but I think that needs to be looked at. And also, I'd mention as well, I think that Michael Schellenberg has taken a really refreshing look at it. He's provided documentation that was provided to John Greenwald of the Black Vault, where they're basically redacting just simple information such as the free kind of places these things may be coming from. Like, why don't they just disclose those free potential origins, basically, where they might be coming from, these UAPs? Like, you could start with that, So there's a lot to go through. I think I've just gone into this topic so much, and I've just kind of like made it. I got this big web in my head now, and the only thing that I can try to do is through my stories is just try to make it more digestible, because it's really difficult to get your head around.
There's just so much, and there's so many parts to it, and so many moving parts to it. And I don't know, I guess I'm a little skeptical, because it almost feels like, from the US side, that whoever is behind these subcontractors, these military contractors, in many cases, they feel like they're more powerful than Congress itself. And that's really deflating, because we know there's tons of money going into these programs. We don't know where all the money's coming from, but we know there's tons of money, but we can't even get Congress to look at them. And, I hope someday we get political finance reform, because once you take the money out of it, where for our people getting elected to Senate and the House, once you take that money out of it, then they don't have any incentive to be able to try to cover up for these military contractors, and I think that's one of the reasons we've had such a tough time getting anywhere, is because many of these politicians owe, these military contractors for getting them elected. And so that's a big problem. Now, I just was talking about the US.
I want to mention something. Can I just mention on that? You're so right. It needs to be completely banned. I think we need to kind of like take more of a Singapore model, pay the politicians more if you need to, but ban them from becoming consultants or having donors from these other third parties. I remember one of my first projects that I was working on, we were doing some research, and we found out that one of their health ministers in the UK was actually being given donations from the fast food industry. It's like, that's a conflict of interest, right? I mean, they're just like, he's basically going to do their bidding. It's just like, it's complete lunacy. It needs to be reformed, definitely. You're so right there, Dale. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Well, it reminds me, my daughter went to school, and she had studied, and I hadn't heard this before, but when our country was founded, it was founded as a republic, and our founding fathers absolutely did not want political parties because they feared that the political parties themselves would control the candidates, and the candidates would be representing the parties rather than the people they're supposed to, in the states they're supposed to be representing. And guess what? That's exactly where we've gone to. Now, having brought that up, is there any push in the House of Commons or the House of Lords there in the UK for any kind of UAP legislation, or is that just strictly here in the US?
No. There were brief discussions within the House of Lords, which isn't an elected chamber. It's basically peerships, or it's basically people who've been given them because of their family titles, and it goes through the generations, and they're not elected by the people. They're either given peerages by the party for doing good work. For so if you worked in it. So, for instance, there have been two recent Lords elected who worked with Boris Johnson, and I advised Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. And before Boris Johnson left office, they were like, "We need to make these guys peers," and they became members of the House of Lords and get given a good salary, hardly have to turn up, take part in debates, get paid lots of money, never get elected. So you have that. So basically, people in the House of Lords can debate this stuff, and they don't have to worry about being elected or how they look and stuff like that. In the House of Commons, which is the elected part of the of Parliament, there is interest. There are ministers who I know without doubt are interested in this topic. But unfortunately, they're not going to stick their necks out. They have other priorities at the moment. And I think just like as in the US, someone needs to show political courage to prioritize this topic for once, to change the whole kind of dynamics in terms of global politics.
So is it apathy, or is it the fact that it's not a bigger issue within society? Because I don't know, you can clarify this or not. Are there less sightings in the UK than there are in the US, or are they about the same?
I would say that it's difficult to say, isn't it? It's
people aren't reporting them.
I mean, we've reported plenty of sightings. I think in the US, because of the amount of nuclear sites there are, I think there's likely more, and also the exotic technology as well. I personally believe, that it's a mixture. I think that you in the US have your own exotic craft with exotic propulsion systems, gravitic propulsion. I believe Matthew Livelsberger, the guy who exploded his Tesla outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, he released a manifesto, and that was reported, and it was released. And then the DOW, or DOD at the time, then classified that manifesto. And he was basically claiming that the things that were flying around New Jersey were actually Chinese drones using gravitic propulsion systems. And they could carry out an unlimited payload and just hover above the White House, and there's nothing they can do about it. And it's only the US and it's only China that has that technology. So that's something. So what I think when it comes to UAPs, when we're talking about the ones that show anomalous properties, I believe that we're seeing non-human, and I believe we're seeing man-made. We're already seeing a Cold War, because it's already been said that there's like an arms race or a Cold War or something happening secretly between these great powers. Well, it's happening right now, I believe. I really think there is this thing going on, this great power play, this great power struggle, where the Chinese will kind of try to saber rattle the US by using their craft. And and then the US will likely do the same to China. And you've only got to look at Matthew Brown and Immaculate Constellation, the documents that he released. It shows instances when black triangles have been seen hovering above the Russian intelligence vessels in the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, hovering above, like the Russians knew they were going to be there. So, I mean, you've either got a scenario there where Russians have made some form of contact with a non-human intelligence, or they belong to Russia. And there's one instance of a Chinese vessel as well rendezvousing with one of these black triangular craft. And this is no longer just kind of like pure amateur speculation. I mean, these black triangles have already been noted by the former deputy director of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, Tim Phillips. I mean, and he's supposed to be the guy who's supposed to debunk all this stuff. And even he said that there's fiery orbs and that there's black triangles. So when it comes to these things, yeah. And obviously in the UK as well, we've had our own instances of drone incursions, which the UK government seems to want to cover up for some reason. That I believe in many of these instances, not all of the instances, but I believe in many of the instances that we are talking about non-human and adversarial, adversary exotic craft. Obviously not all the time, and I think there are some instances as well where these drones have actually been misidentifications of planes and other things, but there's a good percentage I think are something else.
Right. Let me ask this question. Do you think, looking at the U.S., because it seems like right now that's the ball's in their court. I mean, there's enough public attention. There's enough private people coming out. The movie was great evidence for that. 34 credible witnesses. Is this all part of a government plan? Is this, slow disclosure, slow drip disclosure? Because when I had Steve Bassett on last week, he really thinks it is. He was kind of like duh when I brought it up. It's like, no, this is what it is. And so, what's your opinion on that? Do you think that this is somewhat staged and this stuff? Because it's going through DOPSR, and these people are told that they can release certain things. And I understand there's some blowback if they try to stop some of the stuff that's not classified from coming out. But it sure feels like we're being slow-fed disclosure. What's your thoughts on that?
To a certain extent, I believe so, yes. I think that there was a plan that didn't go to plan. The people betting that Hillary Clinton was going to become president and her being the disclosure president. When that didn't happen, they had to pivot. I think a certain element of it is the deep state kind of like playing some kind of kayfabe, which is a term used to describe wrestling. So it's kind of like you got to suspend belief and think this is all real in terms of these wrestlers that have their own kind of grievances and stuff like that, their own drama, and they're wrestling, they're really fighting each other and stuff. But it's all staged, to keep you entertained. And I think there is an element of that possibly happening when it comes to this stuff. I do believe that Lockheed Martin and some of the contractors do want this technology out. I think there are multiple reasons for that. I think firstly, it's because they're not getting as much talent as they used to. So the top engineers are no longer going to Lockheed Martin and other contractors. They're going to SpaceX instead because that's sexier. And they want to shout saying, "Hey, come here! Look, we've got all this cool stuff that you could be working on." So there's that element. They're not getting the the quality and caliber of employees anymore coming to them, the talent. Secondly, even if they do get the talent as well, which is kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, is that it's so difficult to actually get clearances to actually work on these programs, reverse engineering programs. It just makes it very, very difficult to do. So I think there's different ways to look at this. And I think also Lockheed is thinking to itself, actually, we do want to make a bit more money when it comes to these craft. But also, it's my personal belief that I think Lockheed have already developed a craft I think they've already kind of got one. Maybe one of the triangles belongs to them, TR3B or whatever you want to call it. I think they're already doing that. It means there's no way that Steve Justice, who's reached a really, really high position within Lockheed Skunk Works, suddenly just quits and starts working on this mad project to create like an electromagnetic anti-gravitic propulsion craft, and he stakes everything on that, and why, and if you did think you could achieve such technology, why did you do it publicly? That would, if you did have the idea, you could have actually pursued that when you were working in Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and then that would have been covered up by the deepest layers to stop your adversaries from getting it. So why'd you go about doing that? It just doesn't make any sense to me unless Lockheed has the tech already and they were looking for a way to get that. And in my opinion, I think Robert Weiss, who was the vice president of Skunk Works at the time, I think he was the guy who was trying to orchestrate that to some extent. Publicly, he won't admit it. I know friends who have contacted him, but I think privately, I think he's.
Do you think China has a big advantage over us in the sense that in that country, they can pretty much get their best and brightest and say, hey, you're going to do this. You don't really have a choice in it, or you go to prison, whereas the US, you have to recruit them. And so do you think we're at a disadvantage, or are we? I mean, the biggest question is, and I've heard some people speculate this, are we losing the arms race simply because of all of this secrecy that's out there where everything's so compartmentalized, and we don't necessarily have our brightest and best in it. Hopefully that's changing, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think China can work at greater scale on these things. I think Russia can as well. I mean, they're very, very effective actually mobilizing their resources right now. I mean, look at the Ukraine, for instance, the conflict there. Russia is gone to a wartime economy. It can procure equipment much cheaper than the Americans and the Europeans, and has the advantage in many ways. It's got lots of resources. China, again, pretty much the same scenario there, but a greater economy, greater level of expertise coming through. So yeah, they can. I mean, the moment that really kind of like convinced me to this scenario, which is what was driving it, is when Lou, our good friend Lou Elizondo, was appearing on the Lou Jimenez show before he turned, and they were coming up with ways to kind of like promote disclosure. And Lou Elizondo mentioned to Lou Jimenez that you could have like a stand, like you could have like a festival for like young people or something like that. Like with music and stuff like that. And then what you could do is you could have like stands for contractors like Lockheed Martin, and they can use it to recruit young people, And that was like, it dawned on me then, that this is one of the reasons why they're trying to get the talent. They're trying to open this up more, trying to make it, trying to normalize it. So yeah, I think that's a big part of what's driving this.
Okay. Question. In the movie, The Age of Disclosure, they had talked about Bush 2, and I mentioned this in Bassett's interview as well, that he almost brought about disclosure. He almost told the world we're not alone, but he put a group together and, some of his top advisors and stuff, and they just said, basically, we're not ready. That was after 9/11. We were going through a lot of turmoil. The economy wouldn't survive. Society would be really hurt by it. And then supposedly in the movie, I heard Dan Farah say that in a couple of interviews, that Trump during his first term was going to bring about disclosure, but he did the same thing. And they said it wasn't ready. And so it begs the question, because everybody's excited, and UAPX and the whole community is, over the moon on it, in the sense that they really believe Trump's going to come out and say that we are not alone. And I hope they're right. But Chris, I'm an even keel guy, and I kind of got caught up in that a little bit, and I got a little too excited. But the problem is Rubio is kind of backtracking on some of his comments in the movie, basically saying he hadn't seen anything. You got to understand the committees that this guy was on, the intel committees. If he doesn't have access to this, that is so scary. But it really brings up, the reason I'm bringing it, I'm coming around to my question. It really comes down is, what's different now than during Trump's first term? What's different now than during Bush II's term when he was going to do it. And so the question is, are we really ready? And let me give you an illustration of something that I heard just the other day, and hopefully it'll help you understand kind of where people are here. I have a friend, and I was talking to her on Wednesday, and she was so excited because she went over by LaGrange, Oregon, and was out there with a friend of hers. They were spending some time together and at a bed and breakfast. And so they go out and start looking around, and all of a sudden they see this huge green ball that is pulsating. It's the size of the moon. And my friend is just enthralled by it. I mean, she's gone through her checklist. This isn't the moon. The moon would be over there. On top of it, we just had a full moon, 2 days ago. And so it's a new cycle. And so there's no way it's the moon. And then on top of it, it's pulsing. It's pulsing. And when it pulses back, it disappears and it's green. And so she's pointing it out to her friend, and her friend can't handle it. She cannot mentally process that this object is in the sky because it doesn't fit her reality. This is where I think the church has been wrong. I think the government has been wrong. I think our school systems have been wrong, because we have been told all our lives that we are all there is, that we are at the top of the food chain. And so they put everybody in a box, and only those who've been able to jump outside of the box can even conceive of this. And so, based on my friend telling me this story about her friend couldn't even process it. I mean, it literally disturbed her. Are we ever going to be ready for disclosure, or is that just something that's part of the price of bringing a new reality? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, COVID happened, people were locked in their homes for months, whether they were ready for it or not. And if this is one of those scenarios that we can't hide it for much longer, because there might be something coming our way, I don't know. Some people say there is. You can't hide it. And like Lou says, it's like rotten fruit or vegetables in the fridge. You're going to start smelling it. It's going to become more apparent. And also, I guess in terms of disclosure, a few people have claimed that China could be the first to come out with the truth. I know that Chinese officials and Russian officials were holding conferences in China and Moscow in 2019 with an apparent plan to try to disclose information about UFOs and do it via the United Nations. And that just suddenly petered out. So we never know what happened to that. But yeah, there is the element that China could do it as well. So it may not be the perfect time. It's never going to be the perfect time. I've been involved with politics. I know what was probably going through Rubio's mind at the moment. His mind and the mind of the administration is on Ukraine, trying to get a peace deal. They're going back and forth with Moscow and Kiev at the moment, trying to get this over the line. That's where their priority is at the moment. And Rubio, most likely, just coming at it from a comms perspective, didn't want to make a big statement about UAP, which would basically undermine his messaging, grab the headlines, and just kind of go against what he wanted to convey, which is the priority of the White House right now, which is Ukraine and other things like immigration, which I guess is one of Trump's priorities as well. UAP is not a priority for them at the moment, unfortunately. Not overtly. If it was a priority, you would see the UAP Disclosure Act within the National Defense Authorization Act from both the House and the Senate, because the defense and intelligence committees are both controlled by the Republicans. So Trump could easily get that done if he wanted to. His chief of staff talks to the leader of the House and the leader of the Senate almost every day. They could do that if they wanted to. So if it was a priority, it would have been done by now. I know that there were kind of like promises that there was going to be disclosure coming this year from Trump officials who had been talking to UAP advocates. I mean, we know that there was a link there. You've only got to see Ross Coulthart and Lou Elizondo appear on Donald Trump Jr.'s show. there was a link there, and there were kind of alleged promises that there was going to be disclosure, that the Trump administration was going to provide transparency. That never happened. It was always kind of like, stay with us, it's going to come up anytime soon. But as we know in politics, there's always something coming up. There's always and it always gets relegated. The only time I saw Trump kind of close to providing disclosure was before he was out of office last time, when he thought he went in it with a mindset the election had been stolen from him. I'm not going to make any comment on that. I don't get involved in politics, especially as I'm a UK citizen. But that was his mindset. It's been stolen from me. And I know that a lot of his supporters would basically say, Trump's wild right now. He's going to burn the house down. He's going to release everything. He's going to release the UAP files. He's going to release what's happened at Roswell and everything. That was their mindset at the time. They just wanted to burn everything down and just release everything. But now I guess you've got you got a different kind of Trump administration this time. And it seems to be more control, whether you agree with him or not. It's not as chaotic as the first administration that he had. I just don't know. Personally, I've been told that he's just not really interested in the topic. And I'm also told that Tulsi Gabbard is interested in it, though, and she's trying to kind of get his attention to say, look, we need to be pushing for this. And in my opinion, it looks like Marco Rubio has been AWOL on this. I believe that something's happened to those former senators and those currently serving with the Intelligence and the Armed Services Committee and the leaders as well. You look at Rounds, you look at Schumer, you look at Gillibrand.
Gillibrand's a big one.
Yeah, Rubio, they've all gone quiet on it. What happened? I do know the Senate staff were threatened, had helicopters flying over their homes. I also know as well that Tim Burchett, he basically said that there being threats that he wouldn't regain his seat, that leadership would run another candidate against him at the next election. So maybe they were threatened. This is the thing. And again, it goes back to what you were saying before about this kind of element of contractors and stuff providing donations, doing the bidding. They seem to have a lot of control when it comes to politics. So they've all gone quiet, and I think they really do need to be challenged more firmly. What happened? Why are you not more? Chuck Schumer did bring back the UAPD along with Rounds, but Rounds seemed unaware in interviews that the UAPD wasn't even part of the National Defense Authorization Act, that it wasn't in there. He kind of seemed unaware. So it's just kind of what happened? Why are you not championing this more? Chuck Schumer said he was going to do this for his friend Harry Reid. Why has he not made a greater deal about this? Why has he not brought it up in an interview? Why has he not released press releases on this? Why is no one pushing for this? If this was such a big deal for them, why would they not be pushing this more?
Why does the UAP Disclosure Act keep failing over and over again? And Matt Laszlo has looked into it, and to this day, he can't figure out who's doing it. That shouldn't be too hard to figure out. And yet it's like a mystery that he cannot solve. You brought up helicopters over people's houses, so you kind of leading me into a question. I asked a few friends to give me some questions for you. And one of them is, because of your reporting, have you ever been threatened by one of the UK intelligence agencies like MI6 or even by the CIA? Has there been anything strange, any intimidation factors, feel like people were following you, anything like that at all?
There's only one instance that kind of freaked me out, which is when we released the Office of Global Access story. When that story was released, my internet went down on my computer, my personal computer. It's kind of just showing up as one bar. All the other devices in the home had 4 bars. The internet was working fine. I called up the internet provider. Everything was fine. They couldn't work out why this was happening to my laptop. And it happened just all of a sudden when that story came out. So, okay, that's strange. And then you get stuff as well that when that story came out, again, we were the ones who were mentioning the link between UAP legacy programs and the Directorate of Science and Technology. We were the first ones who came out with that. And we were told that, we actually spoke to Schellenberger before it came out for advice. And he was basically just get this story out as quickly as you can because your safety this out. And we were being told that, people could come after you. Matt was told to change his description on his X account to say journalist, because if he wasn't explicitly shown as a journalist, there are ways that they could come after him. So
for disclosing information, is that what you're saying? Or for releasing these articles and stuff?
That's it. Yeah. And this is the thing, when you're releasing information like this, there are always people that are going to come after you. There's always kind of like, just think about it like this, there's lots of UAP personalities, there's lots of journalists and stuff like that. And I'm the same as well. We are our sources in a way. The information that we relay is the information of our sources. And I believe as well that a lot of the time when people are attacking other people on UAPX, I think it's just their sources just saying, this guy's full of bullshit, call him out, blah, blah, blah. And the other guy's like, yeah, we don't like him either. And that's what happens, You recall that when I released the information about the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, I was being attacked when I started talking about retrieval programs undersea. And I was warned that they were rather nasty about that in terms of the people involved in that program, that I should expect some people to come at me. And it's the same, and I can get why it's a big deal. I can see why they're all focused on the US Air Force as one of the gatekeepers instead of the US Navy, because when you're talking underseas, the domain underseas, it's a lot more classified and it's a lot more crucial for national security. The same with space. When it comes to undersea, you're talking about the nuclear deterrent, and it's a highly classified area. And people don't want to talk about that, unfortunately. I see why, but my job as a journalist is just to tell the truth.
Right.
And the truth as I see it. Obviously, when it comes to UAP stuff, it's very difficult to actually properly verify your information. And hopefully one day there will be verification, and we'll see how well these stories have aged. But I'd also just point out one more thing as well, that there is a deep relationship as well between the CIA and technology companies. You got In-Q-Tel, which is basically a feeder from the CIA providing technologies to American firms to ensure that they're maintaining their tech dominance and economic dominance. And you've got look inside Google's trust and safety team. Who is it staffed by? Lots and lots of former CIA officials. That's who it's staffed by. And when you saw the story come out about the Office of Global Access, there was like a warning that came on when you search for it on Google saying that you're not to trust this story or something along those lines, just to sow some doubt in people's minds. That
right.
hardly ever came up. The only other time that I saw that come up that I can recollect is when drone or UFOs, as they say, were being seen over the Skunk Works facility in California when that was happening. And there were the same things coming up there as well. I think these things, this is the thing, that the intelligence community has a grip on all these places, I believe. And, the algorithms, whatever, will do their bidding for them. So you've got journalism when it comes to print media. You've got the internet as well, where a lot of people get their news from. And I believe that the kind of like one of the final frontiers now is podcasts. I'm podcasters who kind of do our bidding. We've got Joe Rogan and stuff like that. He's known for more people trust Joe Rogan than they do the New York Times, for instance, and other publications. So now they've got to find a way of kind of like getting into that world. So you got to look at these things, and I've even reported. So just going on a different stream here. Let's look at archaeology, for instance, as well. I was reporting about retrieval programs relating to craft that were found as part of archaeological excavations. And if you look back, I think in 2001, The Guardian released a story about a crisis in the archaeological community because so many had been working with intelligence communities. And it's a crisis because there were so many archaeologists. I don't know why people like Graham Hancock don't look into this, because this is like, this is actually happening. Yeah. So, I mean, if you wanted to cover up kind of like an ancient advanced race or whatever that some people believe in. Well, this is your perfect domain, because you've got archaeologists who are on the payroll of intelligence community that are happy to do your bidding for you. Right. So I think that's one kind of like major overlooked thing as well. But I don't mean to sound paranoid, but this is what they do. They want to control the narrative. They want to protect their secret programs and illegalities that they're doing. It's just what it is,
One of my friends on Signal, one of the questions he had, and I think probably I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. His initials are MIW, and he says, "Does the UK have its own crash retrieval and reverse engineering program? Is there a Skunk Works in the UK under a different name that may be working on some of this equipment? Maybe not necessarily for the UK, but we'll just go a little broader. Let's say the Five Eyes Alliance. New Zealand, Australia, Canada, UK, and America. That's the Five Eyes Alliance. And so, could some of the work not be just at like Lockheed Martin or Grumman or maybe SpaceX now, but in the UK, do you think there's any contractors there working on some of this stuff?
Yeah, 100% I do. Firstly, I believe that there are retrieval missions in the UK. I've reported those before. Those are reality from my understanding. And secondly, Falcon Works, BAE Systems, that's kind of like the equivalent to Skunk Works. And BAE Systems is in a unique position where it has its kind of like UK division and it has its US division as well. It's very, very important. BAE Systems, very important.
How come we're not hearing the whistleblowers come out of these places? Is their security better, or just nobody will listen to them in the UK? Because obviously, if they're working on it, they've seen it.
Yeah. I think in the UK, secrecy in the UK is a different culture in the UK than it is the US. For instance, you've got former CIA officials over the news and stuff, and doing interviews and stuff. That doesn't really happen much in the UK, where you've got MI6 officials kind of like going on the news and stuff like that, retired officers who used to work in the field and stuff. So it's a different culture when it comes to secrecy. It's a lot more locked down in the UK as well. And I would also add as well.
Let me check on that for a second though, Chris. Is that because of like World War II? When you guys had, you had war and right there where you're at. And, I remember the old saying, loose lips sink ships. But I mean, when you're the one actually being attacked, now we had Pearl Harbor, but, there were basically no bombs dropped on our country during World War II. And so is that why, the Battle of Britain, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, you guys, when there was basically nobody standing with you, you guys were the ones out there standing alone and, and getting it done. Now, it obviously helped when we finally got on board, and we did send you stuff to try to help. But I was just wondering if that had something to do with this, why maybe you hold on to secrecy a little bit better than we do, because you've seen the consequences of intel being leaked and how it actually has a human toll to it.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back more than 1,000 years of history that we've got as of a country, and this is all passed down in terms of lessons that we've had throughout our history, including World War I and World War II, which devastated our country. So, we're a small country, we're an island nation, and obviously we've never had the military clout that America does. We've had a big navy. We've never had really a big army or anything like that. We've always relied on well-trained personnel, outsmarting the enemy, and good intelligence. So that's what we've always kind of relied on. We can't rely on a big armed forces to back us up all the time. We can rely on people working on secret programs like Enigma and things like that. So that's kind of how it's, how it is in the UK in terms of our culture. But also, I think there is the fear element as well. You've heard of the Marconi murders, where it was like I think it was G Marconi or something like that, in the late 80s, which is a firm based in the east of England. And workers were working on a secret program. This is what the hearsay was about anyway. And that they were complaining that there were weird physics involved, and it was something to do with the Star Wars program from Ronald Reagan. And they were known as the Marconi murders because employees kept on dying, car accidents, you name it. Just, it was over the national press at the time. So I think, we take it very, 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 very seriously here in terms of secrecy. But that's not to say that there are some things that are not, kind of shared. I remember there was a press article in the Telegraph about a year ago where they went to. Sorry, my son's just interrupting. They were showing, it was a facility in the UK in Cambridgeshire, and it was an intelligence center. I can't remember the name now, but the journalist from the Telegraph, he saw drones, like Shahid drones, like Iranian drones and stuff that had been captured on the battlefield in the Ukraine. Like, how did you get your hands on these? And I think the officer who was with the journalist just winked, saying, "We have our ways." But this is nothing kind of like controversial. The UK and all nations of half a brain will have their retrieval programs. And it just so happens that some of the missions that you have within these programs are with unknown origin, exotic craft, basically. So
that's perfect segue. Let's get into drones for a little bit. Now, this first question is going to come from somebody he's been commenting here as well. His name is Gary. He's known on X as Gaz, and so he wanted me to harass you a little bit and say he's still looking to have that pint with you.
Oh, yeah. We need to do it. Maybe in the UK sometime we'll get together. I mean, I need to get in touch. Like there are a few people in the UK I do have pints with from now and then. But
maybe y'all and Luke can get together, make it really good.
It's difficult, like you get so many emails, so many messages and stuff like that, and so many people want to meet up with you. You want to meet up with so many of them, especially your friends and the friendly ones. And then also you kind of got to be careful as well. I've had people that have kind of gone to Facebook before, started messaging my wife, people that started abusing me and my wife as well. And some guy from Scotland who went absolutely crazy at me, just saying you're a liar, started getting really aggressive at me, and you're like, oh my gosh, what if this guy showed up at my doorstep one time, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, gosh, this is because people get really angry with you sometimes.
It's scary.
You're not doing your job, Chris. You're not reporting on the UK enough. You're not doing this, Chris. You're not doing that, Chris. Obviously, you know what it is, Chris. You're lying. You get stuff like that. You're like, guys, I get up every morning. I take my kids to school. I change nappies most of the time. I try to do meetings at work with my daughter climbing on top of me. That is my day-to-day life. It's not glamorous. It's just, but sorry, just.
Oh, no, I get it. I mean,
I would love to meet guys for a drink. I would love to. I'm not based in London anymore. It's more difficult to get to places, but we'll
someday maybe
we'll do something. We'll go to Brewdog in Waterloo, which is one of my favorite places. So that's always.
Here's his question. His question, it had to do with the different bases in the UK, the RAF Lakenheath, RAF Mildenhall, RAF Feltwell and Suffolk and Norfolk, and then RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire. So these were the bases that these drones were flying over, this unauthorized airspace. And so his question was, did they use any kinetic weapons, any traditional weapons, to try to shoot these so-called drones down? Was there an actual attempt, in even beyond that? You can take it beyond that. Did they use other types of weapons? But that was specifically his question.
Oh yeah, very good question. So yeah, you had Lakenheath, Feltwell, and Mildenhall, which is basically the same kind of area in the UK. I think they straddle from the Norfolk, and it's quite funny because you got Norfolk and Southwark, and they got their names because you got the Norfolk and then you got the Southfolk, and that's how it came about, which I always found funny. But yeah, these huge US Air Force bases there, and from my understanding, special forces were on the scene. And they were using some of the most advanced kind of technology to try to bring these drones down. But they didn't go as far as kinetics. So they didn't take kinetic action. I think they were on the verge of, but that never happened.
And they were, how effective were they?
The jamming failed. All jamming attempts failed. And I point out as well that, I've reported this, and it's been known that it's that detection has failed as well when it comes to these. And
were they pre-programmed, Chris? Were they pre-programmed? Is that why that didn't work? Jamming signals, if it's like a computer that's already pre-programmed, or is it something else?
It could be both. So I will go on the public record. So some think that they are AI, or they're doing a pre-programmed kind of like route, but also that there is a controller looking at a screen, and if they want, they could actually take control of it anytime they want. So that is one of the theories. But something which I believe was said by the Belgian defense minister is that they kept on changing. I think they kept on changing their frequencies. So it became impossible to kind of like jam them because of that. So yeah, we're talking really high tech stuff here. And if they're able to change their frequencies and they're Russian, why wouldn't Russia use this stuff in the Ukraine? Yeah, it's just strange. And also, look, when we're talking about drones and stuff like that, what makes us think that automatically it has to be human drones? What makes people think that all kind of like UAP in terms of possible non-human origin actually, are all piloted and not drones themselves? So it's such a semantics game when you're talking about UAP and drones and stuff like that. And also I'd point out as well that it wasn't just Lakenheath and Feltwell and Mildenhall. It was other bases as well. I believe there was one as well in Gloucestershire where it was happening, which is an American Air Force base. I can't remember the name now. But also it was over other bases. It was over
Fairford.
Fairford, that's it, Fairford. But it was also over. I believe it was also over Portsmouth Naval Base as well. It was over the atomic weapons establishment in Aldermaston, which is close to where I was brought up in Reading, in Berkshire, which is where the UK keeps the nuclear weapons. It used to be quite funny, actually. When I was younger, we used to play football next to the weapons establishments in Aldermaston and Burfield. So you'd be playing football, and just like across from you would be all these like gates and stuff and fences to stop you from going into the nuclear weapons site. A lot of my friends, actually, when you grow up in Reading, a lot of your friends actually go on to work there. And my friend who actually lives near the Aldermaston facility where we keep the nuclear weapons said that she did see a drone in the sky when those events were occurring. So I do believe they were spotted over Aldermaston as well. So yeah, these are really, really serious things that have been going on, and I think the UK is very, very ill prepared for drones, whether they be Russian or non-human, in all honesty.
Well, I'm going to follow up with a question. I mentioned all the bases. What I didn't mention is, we know the New Jersey drones and everything that happened over there. Langley was, I think, almost 11 months, something like that. If I could be a little off on that, but it's close to that. We had drones over there. They had to, take the whole squadron of F-35s and move them away because of this. And then we had these other places. We had Wright-Patterson, we had the Picatinny Arsenal, we had the Joint Base McGuire, Dix, at Lakehurst, and then also the Naval Weapons Station, Earl. And so the reason I bring that up is I have a question, and I think you can probably answer this. These so-called drone incursions in the UK, was that really against the UK, or was it spying on US equipment in the UK, and maybe it was both of those things? Let's just go over some of the US equipment that are on some of these RAF bases. Like at Lakenheath, there's F-35As and F-15E fighter jets. RAF Mildenhall, that's the home to the U.S. Air Force's 100th Air Fueling Wing. RAF Fairford, the one in Gloucestershire we were just talking about, that's a base for B-2 bombers. And so you brought up some good points, Chris. A lot of this stuff seems to center around, and we see this with UFOs as well, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, about nuclear sites. Now there seems to be a strong presence, especially in probably the most difficult space there should be to get into, the restricted military air bases and airfield and airspace. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that that was a continuation of what was taking place in New Jersey at all these other military establishments there and around? Or do you think this was something different?
Yeah, I think it's a continuation. Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp reported the 2019 drone incidents over the West Coast, where drones were harassing US warships and coming from the water. So you had those, and then you had Langley a few years afterwards. But also between those as well, you were having incidents reported across the US in relation to mysterious drones. I believe that they're interested in US and UK and French facilities, just the whole host really. But again, going back to kind of like my core belief at the moment, obviously this is my own opinion. I think that if we're going down this route, one of the scenarios I had in my head is something that Tom DeLonge mentioned, is that there is like a Cold War playing out between earthly nations, but they're basically being orchestrated by factions or competing non-human intelligences. And I believe that's kind of...
I'll tell you what, everybody thought Tom was crazy, but kind of like Bob Lazar, and I know people have problems with him, but it sure seems a lot of the stuff that he was talking about, I think it was 89. A lot of it's people are talking about it today, so it isn't as crazy as it seemed back then. But Tom DeLonge, same thing. I mean, I read his first book, Secret Machines, and I was fascinated. But when you talked about the Russian ship in the Atlantic with the triangle above it, our spy apparatus caught that. I mean, I'm getting a lot more respect for Tom DeLonge, and maybe there's a lot more to what he was saying.
Bring him into Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about your advisors. Let's get names on the table. Who did you talk to? Because his advisors were very, very senior, very, very senior. And it was a lot more than not just Neil McCasland and Michael Carey. There were many, many more. many more.
Well, this begs the question, because we're really talking about it, and obviously you're talking about that triangle. That's either straight up NHI or it's reverse engineered, and it's something that maybe the Russians have now, the Chinese have now. I'm guessing we probably have it. Even in that book, it's like we have it, they have it, and there's this secret war going on. But as you look at the so-called drones over the UK, and you can combine the US in it, do you think, especially with everything you described, it sounds like it's something that Russia and China would do, because they're going to monitor, they're going to spy, they're going to try to do it. But is there the possibility that there's an unconventional actor here? And I'm talking about like NHI. Could that be part of it? That, that these are not necessarily, some of these things are not necessarily drones, but
Yeah.
something else?
Yeah, for me, everything is on the table when it comes to these things. Everything is on the table until we find and we verify who the controllers are, and the origin of these things. Everything is on the table. And we shouldn't be so certain. You know, the French were certain when these events are happening in October that it was coming from a Russian Shadow Fleet ship. Well, they boarded that ship, they found nothing. You know, again, they thought the Bass Strait was where the drones are coming from when they were harassing the US warships in 2019. Well, look, they searched the Bass Strait, nothing was found. Eyes were on the Bass Strait throughout those incidents, nothing was seen coming from the ship and to the ship. So everything is on the table because these things can't be explained at the moment. These things can't be explained. I'm sure that, you know, once in a while you will have an amateur drone or something like that that's shot down. And you can say, hey, look, we've solved this one. It's a normal drone. Of course, there's so many drones now, ubiquitous, you know. But I do think when it comes to these things that they are showing technology and capabilities that are very difficult to explain. And what I'd also say as well, that I don't think it's always the case where these things are undetected. I think that they are being detected sometimes, and sometimes when they're detected, they're not always seen. So I think that's worth taking into account as well. And also when it comes to New Jersey, I would say that there's been got a lot of spin over these. You know, we know them as New Jersey drone incidents, but they are happening across multiple states across the US, you know. And
even 5 years earlier, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas. I mean, so this isn't even when it was going on. You know, if you talk to others, we had drone swarms before that. But one of my concerns, and I hear other people using it as well, is that drone is now the catchphrase for everything. You know, it's like swamp gas, it's like weather balloons. Don't you think that's a dangerous thing? Because if we're just going to call everything drones, and we don't, like you said, everything's on the table. I say that all the time when it comes to what the phenomenon is. I don't think you can, until it's been eliminated and we're trying to figure out what the phenomenon is, everything should be on the table. And so as we're looking at whatever these so-called drones are, don't you think it's a mistake to kind of use that as a catchphrase? Because how serious are we going to take it if it's just drones? You know, adversarial drones may be a little more serious, but aren't we missing something by doing that?
yeah, I think you are. And I think also it's kind of like, I think the community gets stuck in the trap in terms of the semantics of it. I think, you know, that you know, are you going to focus on the type of craft it is? Drone, maybe fighter, spaceship, or, you know, you're going to concentrate on the origin. You know, could you call it non-human vehicle, adversarial vehicle, civilian vehicle? Just kind of like, and I'm always mindful of this when I'm doing my stories as well. Like, how do you best describe these things? And, you know, if we are going to put everything on the table, what do people mean usually when they mean UFO? Well, they mean alien spacecraft, don't they? So I think, you know, I think it's sometimes we can fall into that trap, and maybe sometimes just need to be more explicit. Are these non-human in nature? Are they human? If so, are they adversarial? Are they just kind of like amateur, or are they civilian aircraft? Whatever, you know. So it's a very, very difficult thing, and they use it as a trap as well. The US Air Force have been using drones for a long time when they explain UAPs. And yeah, it's very, very difficult. I once had a conversation with Susan Goff, you know, when she was saying that these things were drones in the case, I think, the triangular craft that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp released footage of, you know, they're described as drones. And I challenged Sue over there, and she like screamed at me, "What else are they? They're too small to carry a pilot." So it's kind of like, it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. It's kind of like their thought process. And when you get caught up in their semantic games, it's very, very easy for them to kind of like control the frame, you know, when it comes to this stuff. And again, as a journalist, and when I'm asking questions and everything like that, you've always got to be very, very careful falling into those traps. You know, I played these games with Susan Goff for a long, long time. You know, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago when I noticed that we're using the term extraterrestrial as opposed to non-human intelligence. Now, what I did was I did a trick on her. I said, I said, Sue, can you please tell me whether extraterrestrial includes non-human intelligence? And she would not answer me. And then I think I changed the headline to something. I might be wrong. It might have been on. I might have like said either Arrow or the DoD cannot rule out that UAPs and non-human intelligence, or something like that, because I'd given her ultimatums. Okay, I'm going to put out this story. I'm going to put out this title unless you can confirm that they're non-human intelligence, and it covers that. And then she didn't, so I put out the title, and all of a sudden she's rushing to kind of like say, okay, yeah, extraterrestrial does include non-human intelligence as well. And she gave me the statement. And then just a few months ago, my buddy Kyle Warfel questioned her, and we were playing a game with her actually. She was basically saying, "Oh yeah, the Arrow has found no evidence of of extraterrestrial origin." And Kyle was like, "That wasn't the question I asked her. I asked her about non-human origin." And then I said to Kyle, I said, "You should like go back to her." And she said, "Thanks, Sue, but you didn't answer my question. Is it okay if we change your statement so we can substitute extraterrestrial for non-human?" And she was like, "No, you may not change my statement." I was like, "Ah." So I was kind of like, I'm thinking, did she make, she may have made a mistake in kind of like sending me that email, just kind of like saying that extraterrestrial does include non-human. I need to find that email again.
So what is the reason for that? I mean, if it's actually included in NHI and she's willing to say NHI, then why is the word extraterrestrial, or if it's 2 words, depending on how you spell it, why is that taboo?
Why is the word extraterrestrial taboo, or the word non-human intelligence? Sorry.
Why is the one? No, non-human intelligence seems to be acceptable. Yeah. You know, whereas extraterrestrial is kind of like, I mean, even in the X community, sometimes, you know, it's because they don't want it to be limited to just extraterrestrial. But I think probably there has to be another explanation for why Susan Go and the Pentagon are absolutely, you know, that's their flat denial word. But it makes, I mean, you caught her in the act. If that's what NHI is, and this stuff is NHI, then how can she say it couldn't be extraterrestrial if that's included, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. She's never said that statement again. She's never said that statement again. So I wonder why. You know, it's yeah. we had a lot of conversations. I really do need to like. I do really need to revisit these conversations that I've had with her, because we've had some really good conversations going back and forth on this stuff. So
it's good that you had contact with her. If you got that one time, because that's documented now, and that's the importance of having journalists involved in this, is because you can get it documented, and you can't take it back once it's documented. It's like you got to be careful what you type on the internet, because once it's out there, guess what? It is definitely out there as well. One of the questions I had about the drones is, I mean, the terminology for some of this drone just doesn't seem to fit unless we're talking, drones from 100 years from now, because what a lot of them are reporting, and this may be a minority, but that they're exceeding known capabilities. And so do you think that, you mentioned AI earlier.
Yeah.
Do you think that AI, that we have far, I mean, it's kind of a dumb question because I know it's true, but is, what the government has, what the military has, as far as AI, that has to be way more advanced than what we have. And so is this the byproduct of AI, or is this something beyond AI? How do you feel about some of this being NHI or extraterrestrial? It doesn't deny that other sightings are UFOs. We got to make sure we put that out there. We're talking specifically about what's going on over our military bases in this restricted military airspace where there seems to be a coordinated effort. So specifically to the so-called drone phenomenon.
In terms of like AI, I think that it's so difficult to explain, in terms of the drone, because I want to like highlight as well that in the 1940s and 50s, 60s and 70s even, there were military pilots who thought they were seeing balloons, and then the balloons would transform into saucers. That was one of the first kinetic actions against a UFO, I believe, by a French pilot who believed that he was shooting at a balloon, and it just transformed. So it seems that they can actually disguise themselves as different objects. But yeah, I think that they're using advanced technology. I think that it's so difficult to go into, isn't it? But I do believe that the CIA has very, very advanced AI technology and has for some time now. I think the former CIA operative, Bustamante, I think his surname is, he's mentioned before that the CIA has some very, very advanced, and has for some time, AI technology. And again, you're talking about a potential role here for In-Q-Tel that could just be providing the information to US tech firms now to ensure they have domination of the tech space. And that may have come from a form of non-human intelligence. When you've had a reverse engineering program that's been spanning for decades now, how can you really tell what technology did come from us and which technology came from somewhere else? All we know is that the world changed immensely after World War II. Germany, one of the most advanced societies in the 1930s, people were voting Hitler in because he was promising to put bread on the table. In London, people didn't have a toilet in many homes, and all of a sudden, here we are today in the Western world, and we've got all this amazing technology, all the things that used to be a priority and scarce to people in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. We don't even think about now. It's just
the scary part for me is I think back to Germany and their rocket engineering and all that stuff. Is, man, if they had done that sooner, and they had definitely got that tech out and made it mass weapons of war, I don't know how we could have defeated them, with that. So we're very, very fortunate. And I think I heard that some of the German scientists were slow rolling it out, hoping that, that we would be able to stop the war before it got to the point where Hitler would be dominant. I know it's been a long day for you, Chris, and I can tell you.
Can I just sorry, I couldn't get off my mind. What we were just talking about in terms of Sukov. So I put out the headline saying Pentagon unable to confirm or deny discovery of materials originating from non-human intelligences or unknown origin within secretive programs. And Sue went absolutely ballistic when I put out that story, and I had to issue an update of that story saying the Pentagon has now confirmed that extraterrestrial in its statement does cover non-human intelligence or non-human origin. Its previous position was that it would not go beyond public statement. Information highlighted in red is outdated. Liberation Times is attempting to establish whether unknown origin is also covered in this term.
Wow. You know what that was? That's a gotcha moment. That's one that should be highlighted. Susan Go is not one of my favorite people in the whole world for obvious reasons. But I love it when I hear stories like that. That's your gotcha moment. She tries to deny, die, lets it slip out, and Chris Sharp's there just waiting.
Yeah, we were always told. I was always one of the famous cases was Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, and he was like, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman" or something like that.
Yeah,
and he was actually correct.
With that woman, exactly.
Well, he was actually saying relations, as in you had a relationship.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have a relationship with that woman, and I think that's how he got around it. It's just like, yeah, it's just they'll use any trick in the book, just to kind of like use semantics to be legally correct and not get into trouble.
I mean, now they just don't do the documents like they used to with FOIA, but isn't that what they did with FOIA? They would use a different term. So if you went looking for one thing, you would have to understand that it may not be under that name, may not be extraterrestrial, may not be this, may not be that. But what I've heard anyway, as far as FOIA goes, is that, they figured out to make a way to make FOIA obsolete. And I know John Greenwald's done a really, really good job with the Black Vault. And so maybe there's still some nuggets to be dug out, but that's what I've heard anyway. I don't know what's your thought on that, Chris, about FOIA?
I think Schellenberg and John Greenwald do have a good point. Let's really push, the Trump administration on these redactions, these documents. Why when we're talking about UAP, why do we have so many heavy redactions, even when it comes to the origin of these vehicles? Like, why is that? Like, it doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think that's a good way to actually push them, because you can actually prove that they're actually hiding information to the US public there. So that's a really, really good strategy. When I saw that, I thought, yeah, that's really, really good to try and pin them down. So I think that might work. But look, there's a whole kind of like backbone behind this. Look what happened. We're talking about the UAPTF report. Look what happened after the UAPTF. We're making great progress. Then all of a sudden, like, the videos become more classified. Kathleen Hicks starts getting involved and establishes the AOIMSG, as it was known at the time before it became the Arrow, and just kind of like totally overtook the topic and sidelined it, placed it within the office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, which was the very office that had been most resistant to the UAP topic when Lou Elizondo was in there. So they put it in the worst place. And ever since, it's just like been dying a slow death. And, I believe that Kirkpatrick wasn't running the show. I believe that John Kozlowski isn't running the show right now.
So do you think he's better than Kirkpatrick?
What's that? Kozlowski's better, yeah, but at the end of the day, he wants his pension. He's gonna toe. He's
not gonna rock the boat.
Yeah, he's gonna toe the company line. I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna go all the way out. But if we do get a disclosure event, wouldn't you love it? Like, if you had like UAP conferences in 10 years' time, you've got Susan Goff there with a stool and
J. Allen Hynek of the future,
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. I know you're tired. I know you've had a long day. It's 11, almost 11:30 there. But I have one more question, and when you think about disclosure, if our government does it, if it finally happens, how would you like to see it happen? Because we talked about my friend who saw the green pulsing orb the size of the moon. So you can imagine she saw clouds come in front of it. And so it was pretty large, but her friend could not grasp it, and there's a lot of people like that. So, Chris Sharp, how would you like to see disclosure unfold to the point where we don't traumatize, the half of the world that is not paying attention? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, like my background is communications. When you think these things through, it gets more complex. When you make the admission that there is a non-human intelligence that have been visiting us, you can't just leave it there anymore. You can't do that. People are going to ask questions, and all of a sudden, when you make the admission, you back it up with verifiable evidence. Then you're going to get, the mainstream media all of a sudden, the White House pool, just every kind of like person who's questioning administration figures, they're all going to be asking the same questions, and there's going to be no running away from them. What is their intent? What do they look like? Have there been struck? How long have you known about this for? There's going to be so many questions, and there's going to be no running away from this anymore. It's going to dominate everything. Trump, if Trump's idea is like, okay, we're just going to say that there's non-human presence among us, I'm going to leave it there. Well, then there's no way of getting away from that. There's no way getting away from that. Every question aimed at him is going to be about UFOs. And then all of a sudden, all the other world leaders are going to be asked the same question. They're going to go into kind of like crisis comms management. And it's going to be very, very difficult to contain, because if this is a worldwide phenomenon, or if you don't get the answers from Trump, it's going to be very, very difficult to actually stop providing to try to contain this and not give answers, because that's all you're going to be asked about from then on. Or maybe some other world leader will. So all of a sudden, you're kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's really, really difficult. And I know that people I've spoken to, and I think this is even being hinted by Lukatsky, is that there's some consciousness component to it, and that there was some technology or something found in one of the crash retrievals that basically holds the keys to unlocking human consciousness. And then that throws up its own problems. Like, okay, how do you regulate this if there's no privacy, if everyone's telepathic? And then you start to think, okay, why does that need to come out as part of disclosure? So there's a whole host of things, and these conversations leave you shaken. Just like, that's strange. Like, why would you need to kind of like unlock human consciousness and telepathic powers as part of this? Why does that suddenly become a thing? But then again, I try to keep to the nuts and bolts when it comes to this, but there is no getting away from the fact that you've got Dr. James Ryder, now deceased, former Lockheed Martin vice president of space systems, going to these consciousness wooey kind of conferences and talking about vibrations and frequency. And well, that's not woo, of course it's not, but he's surrounding himself by these people, and some of the things they're talking about seem pretty out there, to the average person. Not to me. I try to keep open mind about everything, but you got to think to yourself, someone so grounded who's got this background in terms of being an engineer, in terms of scientific theory, and what leads a person like that. What has he been exposed to that's taken him down that path? And then it makes you think, just to leave off on this, you sometimes think about like these raw kind of like wooey people. I don't want to judge them at all, by the way, but this is just how best to explain them, about how they will come up to your average person, who talk about a galactic command, and you need to all be in sync, and we all need to have this kind of consciousness to accept everything. And I don't know, all these like strange things that you hear about. And what if that's all true, and these people are part of the program, and they're just like living a different reality now, and we're just kind of like, we've just kind of got like a blind spot to it. Like we have like normal people have a blind spot to the UFO topic, like, oh, it's all woo, and there's the stigma behind it. What if like people like me, who are like being more nuts and bolts and stuff, and just following the evidence, have got a blind spot to these people? I just think, oh, I'm not too sure about that. I'm not going to leave it off the table. But what makes me think I don't have and this is how I always think as a journalist. I leave nothing off the table. I mock no one unless they're really mean. But I can't rule anything out when it comes to this. I think that there is a consciousness element to it. And it's just one of the great mysteries of life. And I got epilepsy, so I have a strong relationship when it comes to the consciousness component of life. So yeah, I'm with off on tangent there.
I have to be honest with you. I mean, I used to be just nuts and bolts. I didn't want to hear about the spiritual stuff. I didn't want to hear about anything that was in the woo field. I simply wanted the nuts and bolts. But the longer you're in the community, the longer you study it, and especially, there's a lot of smart people that are looking into consciousness. And so this whole vibration thing at first seemed crazy, but there seems to be some scientific evidence to support it. Now, since we're talking about this, what are your thoughts on amnesty? as we talk about disclosure, because we're still on that question.
Yeah, I think amnesty is a good way of getting of bypassing the level of secrecy. It's good in terms of providing transparency. However, I think there needs to be compensation and justice for the whistleblowers who are not up the top of the pile, that are not generals and admirals and senior officers who've got a great pension. The people whose lives have been destroyed by this, whether it be their health, whether it be just being messed around with, not having answers, whether it be not being able to find a job anymore. We need justice. We need justice. And you think about, what about the families? You know, what about people that have been murdered potentially through the secrecy?
Where I was going to ask. Is there a line somewhere that we say amnesty up to this, or is it blanket amnesty, and then, like Steve said, something about, you know, reconciliation afterwards? And he had another word in there, I can't remember it now, but that's the hard one, I think, for some people to get over. You can recompense people who've been lost jobs, lost wages, but what about somebody whose family member was killed? That's kind of a different story. But then again, the stakes are high. If this is the only possible way to get there, then I guess you have to at least evaluate. And Steve mentioned South Africa, that they had to go through the process, and people had to be forgiven some heinous crimes for the sake of the country itself. It's still a hard thing to deal with. I don't know if you want to do this or not. We'll close it out because I can tell you've had a long day.
That's okay.
You want your son to come out, or would you rather him?
Lincoln, do you want to say hello to everyone?
I want everybody to meet Lincoln.
He would love that. He's always wanted to appear before a podcast, but he might freeze now and get nervous.
That's all right. All you got to do is just say hi. Hi, Lincoln. We're so glad to have you on the podcast.
Is this live?
Yeah, it's live.
This is live. You are actually, everybody's watching you right now, and they sure appreciate you, Lincoln.
My children are the most important part of my life.
Absolutely. You got your priorities right. Anyway, thank you for being so patient with us. Well, Chris, I'm going to close the podcast out now, if that's okay, unless you got something else that you want to finish it with.
It's 11 p.m. here.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your kindness. I mean, thank you so much for having patience. Like, you are a fantastic human being, and I think you can tell a lot about people by how they kind of interact with you, and especially when it comes to patience as well, and being so kind and understanding, because we had to postpone this as well when we were going to do it on Wednesday. So just thank you so much, and thank you to your audience as well. And Gaz, we will get a drink soon. Definitely. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. It was an honor having you on the show. I'll go ahead and close it out now. Well, to everyone that's been watching, I've had this channel for a couple of years now, and if you go through my channel, you see I've had some incredible guests, and Chris is at the top of the list, and so blessed to have him on. And I can't believe how much that guy knows. Just has so much just on the top of his head, And so we were very, very, very fortunate to have him on. But if you haven't done it yet, let me encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Next week, I'll be having Linville Logan on. In case you're not familiar with Linville, he was a member of the UAP task force, and we're going to be talking about the Brown Mountain Lights. So that's going to be a very, very exciting podcast. So make sure you hit that bell as well, so you get notifications of all the new podcasts coming up. If you want to help us out, go a little bit further, go ahead and tell people about the podcast. Don't just subscribe. Go ahead and share it and tell your friends about it. We sure would appreciate it. Anyway, God bless and goodbye. Appreciate you.
Open eye, feel the waves cut through me, hypnotized by the sounds I'm breathing.